Oh, fuck yeah.
Before I actually start the process of painting, I'm going to start by base coating the model. I'm going to use a solid black base coat from an aerosol spray can. Make sure to get something that is intended specifically for models. I generally repurpose old Amazon boxes as disposable spray boxes. I would generally advise against doing this indoors, but where I am, it is currently too cold to safely do this outdoors. Miniatures will do weird things in extreme high or extreme low temperatures. I am doing this in my house, in a space I know I'm not worried about getting paint on things with the windows open.
So now that our paint is dry, we're just going to dry brush a layer of silver on here. I'm going to use cheapo brush. I got this at the dollar store with a bunch of others. And we're going to use some silver paint, some acrylic silver. I'm just going to brush that on.
Don't worry about using too much silver paint. The later stages will let you correct this if you end up going crazy with this and coming out with something that's basically completely brown. While I personally find the process of dry brushing to be therapeutic, I'm going to save you guys all of the stages of this and just show you some highlights of the process. Once I had a decent base layer of silver dry, I ended up applying a layer of dark yellow paint mixed with alcohol. Yellow is a surprisingly unforgiving color. Don't feel bad about having to apply multiple layers of it to get the shade and tone you're looking for. You can kind of tell that I am applying this relatively thick. That's not going to work very well for scale miniatures, but for a cosplay prop, it's more than serviceable. I initially planned on painting the metal plates in front of the gun the same shade of yellow, but changed my mind. I wanted to vary up the colors a little bit because I wanted to go with something that was a little bit inspired by Necromunda and a little bit inspired by Fallout so that I could use it for different things. So I ended up going with a bright red. For whatever reason, the acrylic red used by both Games Workshop, Privateer Press, Tamiya, you name it, is a very forgiving color. Yellow would be the hard mode, red or blue very quickly gets into easy mode for layering, shading, making things look good. I used a very, very light blue from Games Workshop for all of the cabling and the tubes heading out of the back of the gun. I wanted to create the impression of electricity, and then did the same thing on the barrel of the gun for a whole sci-fi feel. I'm not being particularly careful with my brush strokes, except to keep them on the surface of this. I'm not worried about having an underlayer of silver or something like that going there. Later inks and shades are going to end up covering any of my sins. I'm actually not using a game color for this. This is ink that I use for calligraphy. You can actually get this at the dollar store or at Walmart for basically nothing. I do later shades just because I want to, but really the only shade you need out of this is this initial ink. I love doing washes of either ink or color because it lets me bring depth to a project, something that I'm painting that otherwise has very little depth, and bring character to it. One of the more difficult things to bear in mind with a wash is balancing it while it's drying so that ink pools where you want it to. Once the ink is dried, I'm going to do another layer of silver over the flat surfaces. I'm not going to hit every part of the flat surfaces, just the major areas that I want to be shiny. Once I've finished with that, I'm going to do a quick dry brush over the areas that are red and yellow. I'm not going to go crazy with this. I'm going to take most of the excess off my brush so that I just get a little smattering of silver. I'm then going to use a combination of brown and black inks to paint over the dried silver paint to add a little bit more depth. Once the shade layers have dried, I'm going to use an India ink-based pen, in this case a Copic marker, and I'm going to paint down all of the lines that I want to have a hard black outline on. India ink is great because if you paint over it, it's not going to end up exciting the ink, and it will just stay that hard black line. For narrower panels, I use a finer tipped India ink pen. I'm being quite serious about this Sharpie. I would not use it for something that I was planning on painting over it, because Sharpie goes weird if you put paint over Sharpie, or water over Sharpie. But we're on the finishing stages of this, and the silver that a silver Sharpie makes is nice. I'm going to apply this to the edges and to areas that I want to pop with that extra little bit of silver. I prefer using fine-tipped pens for detail work with a thin black line or a thin metallic line if I can use it. In fact, there are brush pens that I will commonly use, even though they are more expensive than their alternatives, because I feel like I have more control over them. You can already see how there's so much more depth now that they have this extra layer on those fine edges. The final step I'm going to do here is hazard stripes. Because I'm pulling from Necromunda and Warhammer, you almost have to have a yellow hazard stripe somewhere on the model or somewhere on the project. For 28mm models, hazard stripes are significantly more complex than they are to achieve with a cosplay project, so a hazard stripe is low-key showing off. Or at least that's why I've always been under the impression that they put them on there. They're kind of cool. I like having them. So I'm just going to put some hazard stripes on this model, because why the heck not? It's what it sounds like. I'm going to paint some diagonal lines with a India ink pen, and it's going to be awesome. I kind of got crunched for time on finishing this build because I had something else I wanted to get to after I finished with this. Honestly, I'm not loving how straight some of these lines are. The smart way of doing this would have been to use a straight edge to plan this in advance, but this was a quick and dirty build, and I really just couldn't be bothered. I should have done it. It would have looked significantly better. I'll probably go back after the fact and touch it up just so that it's a lot cleaner, but it is a cut twice, measure once solution that is not a great way of doing things. The better way of doing this is to measure in advance and go from there. And just like that, it's done. The total build took me about 3 hours, about 2 hours of which was waiting for paint to dry. Bear in mind, it took me longer to do this than it would take you to do this, because I was stopping and staging things so that they would be properly there for the camera. Realistically, this build, minus the actual time spent waiting for paint to dry, should take about an hour.
Oh, fuck yeah.